He was just an engineer, a human with nothing but worn-out tools and stubborn hope. Yet in a forgotten corner of the galaxy, he built a visor and gave a blind alien girl her first glimpse of the stars. But what began as a gift of sight soon became a spark of fear. And when 4 elite soldiers arrived at his door, he realized he hadn't just changed her life. He had changed the future of them all. The workshop was quiet, too quiet for a place filled with broken machines and humming circuits. Elias sat hunched over the bench, light from a single suspended lamp spilling across his hands. His fingers trembled, not from fatigue, but from the weight of what he was doing. Pieces of alloy, tiny slivers of crystallized circuitry, and a lens no wider than a coin lay before him. To anyone else, it was junk. To him, it was hope. A sigh escaped his lips as he adjusted the frame of the device. A prototype visor meant for eyes that had never seen. His tools clicked softly, the sound echoing in the hollow silence of the night. If this works, he thought, it won't just change her life. It might change everything. He set the visor down and stared at it, the way one might stare at a loaded weapon or a sacred relic. Because in truth, it was both. He first met her 2 months earlier. The station was crowded that day. Alien merchants selling fragrant spices, tech traders hawking malfunctioning drones, humans moving carefully between towering non-humans with eyes that glowed or scales that shimmered. Elias had been hunting for a replacement part for a grav-core stabilizer when he heard a sound. Not a sound, really. A melody. A child's voice, soft and uncertain, humming in the middle of the throng. He stopped, scanning the crowd. That's when he saw her. A small alien girl, no older than 10 by human measure, stood near a stack of crates. Her skin was pale lavender, her hair a deep silver that seemed to catch the light even in shadow. But her eyes were closed, and her small hands groped the air in front of her. Blind. The crowd moved around her as though she were invisible. She hummed louder, perhaps to comfort herself, perhaps to let the world know she was there. But no one stopped. Not until Elias. He crouched down. "Hey," he said softly. "Are you lost?" Her head turned toward his voice, ears twitching in recognition. I can't find my brother." Her accent was thick, her words halting, but she spoke his language. Elias guided her out of the flow of the crowd, asking questions, trying to reassure her. Within minutes, a frantic young alien boy appeared, scooping her into his arms and bowing his thanks repeatedly before rushing off. Elias could have left it there. He could have returned to his work, to the comfort of broken machines and predictable repairs. But he didn't. Because when she turned toward him just before disappearing into the crowd, her blind eyes opened for a moment. And though she could not see him, Elias felt a connection so raw, so painfully human, it stayed with him long after. Her name was Auri. He saw her again the next week, sitting near the docks with her brother. They had little surviving off scraps, relying on pity and luck. Her brother worked odd jobs, sometimes dangerous ones, leaving her alone for hours. Elias began to stop by, bringing food, sometimes tools for the boy. But what drew him most was Auri herself. Her spirit, her laughter, her endless questions. Why does metal sing when you strike it? Do stars make noise when they shine? Why can't I see? That last one cut him deepest. He tried to explain gently, speaking of eyes and nerves, of things broken before birth. She listened, head tilted, unblinking. Then she asked the question that started everything. "Can you fix me?" He almost said no. He should have said no. But the words caught in his throat. Instead, he heard himself whisper, "Maybe." And so the visor was born. Elias poured every spare hour into it. Using fragments of alien tech, repurposed human implants, even black market sensor arrays, he crafted something impossible, a device that could translate light into neural pulses compatible with her physiology, a bridge between darkness and sight. But he knew the risks. Some cultures guarded disability as sacred, believing it shaped destiny. Others feared human interference, especially when it meddled with biology. If word spread that he, a human, was experimenting on one of their children, well, the galaxy had little patience for outliers. Now, weeks later, the Visor sat ready. Elias wiped his hands, his heart pounding as he tucked it into a worn satchel. He left the workshop, footsteps echoing down the narrow steel corridors of the station. Every step felt heavier than the last. When he arrived at the small living space where Ori and her brother stayed, she was waiting at the door. "Elias!" She beamed, recognizing his gait before his voice. "Did you bring something?" He smiled, though it felt fragile. "Maybe." Her brother Kale hovered nearby, suspicion etched across his face. He had grown wary of Elias, though grateful too. Still, trust was not easily given. "What is it?" Kyle asked, folding his arms. Elias hesitated, then pulled out the visor. It was sleek, metallic, curved to fit snugly over Auri's eyes. Small circuits glowed faintly along its edge. "A gift," Elias said quietly. "Something that might help her." Kale's eyes narrowed. "You shouldn't." But Auri was already reaching out. "For me?" Her voice trembled with wonder. Elias knelt, holding it out. "Yes, for you." The moment hung suspended. Auri's fingers traced the visor, feeling the smooth metal, the warmth of circuits alive with hidden energy. Her blind eyes flickered behind. Closed lids. "Will it hurt?" she whispered. "No," Elias said gently, "but it will be different." Kale shifted uneasily but did not stop her. At last, with trembling hands, Auri lifted the visor and placed it against her face. It clicked softly into place, adjusting automatically to her features. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the glow intensified. A soft hum filled the air. Auri gasped. Her eyes flew open beneath the visor, and for the first time in her life they saw. The room exploded with color. She cried out, stumbling back as light poured into her mind. Shapes blurred, fractured, then sharpened. The walls, the floor, her brother's face. Tears sprang instantly as she reached out, touching him, then pulling back, staring at her own hands as though they were miracles. "Kale!" she shouted, voice breaking. "I can see you!" Her brother froze, shock etched across his features. He cupped her face, eyes wide, his voice trembling. "Ori, you—" She laughed, sobbing, spinning in circles. Her gaze landed on Elias at last. For the first time she saw him. "You—" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You gave me the stars." Elias swallowed hard, emotion burning his throat. He wanted to tell her no, he hadn't. That all he had given her was a tool, a fragile prototype that might fail at any moment. But when she looked at him, eyes shining with life, he couldn't speak. For the first time in his life, he felt infinite. That night, Ori would not stop staring. At everything. At the flicker of shadows, at her brother's tired smile, at the gleam of metal beneath the dim lights. But most of all, at the window. Outside, the stars burned against the velvet dark, countless and eternal. She pressed her hand against the glass, her visor translating light into living fire. "They're singing," she whispered. "I can hear them in my eyes." Elias stood behind her, silent. He wanted to believe it was only her imagination, but deep down, he suspected she was. Right, the visor was not just letting her see. It was letting her perceive more. something he did not understand, something that frightened him. And though he didn't know it yet, others had already heard whispers. Whispers that would bring 4 soldiers to his door. The station never truly slept. Even in the hours between cycles, when most beings retreated into cramped quarters and dim-lit bars, the massive ring structure hummed with its own heartbeat. Engines throbbed, air recyclers whispered, metal groaned, as it adjusted to the pull of its orbit. But for Elias, the station felt louder than usual. Ever since that night, ever since Ari had opened her eyes to the stars, the silence of his workshop was pierced by echoes that weren't there before. Every sound reminded him of her voice, her laughter, her awe. "You gave me the stars." Those words refused to leave him. He should have felt proud. Instead, he felt hunted. Ori, of course, felt none of that. Every day she begged to see something new. The markets, the docking bays, even the seedy underbelly of the station that Kyle tried to keep her far away from. With her visor, she moved with an energy that left Elias speechless. She touched everything, tasted everything, stared until her eyes watered. She laughed at colors, gasped at shadows, and spent long hours describing things she thought she'd only imagined. "The sky isn't black," she whispered once, as they sat near a viewport looking at the distant planet below. "It's filled with colors you can't hold. It's like it's breathing." Elias nodded, watching her expression more than the stars. There was wonder in her voice, but also something else, something sharper. "What do you mean?" he asked carefully. She frowned, tilting her head. "I can see what's real, but also what's behind it. It's like the air isn't empty, it's full of threads." Elias stiffened. "Threads!" Her small hands gestured clumsily, as though weaving. "Like light and shadow woven together. They move when people move. They glow when people laugh. They fade when they're sad." He said nothing, because the visor wasn't designed for that. It was designed only to translate light into signals her brain could understand, nothing more. And yet, she was describing something far beyond light, something he couldn't measure or explain. Kale noticed too. At first, he was simply protective, keeping Ari close, reminding Elias that she was still fragile despite her new vision. But soon, his wariness turned into something else. Fear. "She's changing," Kyle muttered one evening, pacing their small room. Ari slept nearby, visor dimmed to a faint glow as it recharged. "She sees things that aren't there. She talks about threads, about voices in the light. What did you build, Elias?" Elias rubbed his temples. "I built exactly what I said. A bridge, a way for her to see. Nothing more." "Nothing more?" Kyle's voice cracked, anger flaring. "You tampered with her mind. You don't know what you've done." Elias flinched. Because he was right. He didn't know. But others were beginning to notice. It started with whispers in the marketplace. A blind child now seeing. A human's invention at the center of it. Most dismissed it as rumor, the kind of story that bloomed in boredom and died in truth. But not all. Merchants spoke to smugglers. Smugglers spoke to officials. Officials spoke to ears. Elias never wanted listening. By the end of the week, the whispers had reached the upper tiers of the station. By the next, they had spread beyond it. And by the time Elias realized what he had unleashed, it was already too late. He first sensed it when he entered his workshop one morning to find the door unlocked. He always locked it. Always. Inside, nothing was taken, nothing obvious at least, but the tools were moved. The bench was slightly cleaner than he'd left it. Someone had been there. Watching. Searching. He worked faster after that, upgrading the visor, adding fail-safes, trying to understand why Ari could see what no one else could. He asked her endless questions, though always gently, never wanting to frighten her. "What do the threads look like now?" Are they brighter when more people are near? Do they change when you take the visor off? Her answers only unsettled him further. They're always there, she said simply. The visor just helps me notice. 2 nights later, Kyle stormed into his workshop. His face was pale, his voice hoarse. They're talking about you. Elias set down his tools, chest tightening. Who? Everyone, Kyle hissed. Doc, workers, soldiers, even the syndicate enforcers. They say you built something forbidden, that you meddle with what's not yours. Elias tried to swallow his panic, but his mouth was dry. It's just a visor, Kale slammed his fist on the bench. It's not just anything. You made her different. You made her something they'll fear, and fear doesn't forgive. Silence. The truth hung in the air between them. Fear never forgave. That night, Elias couldn't sleep. He sat in his dim workshop, staring at the visor's schematics. His hands shook as he traced the circuitry on the display. What have I done? Every invention had consequences. He knew that. He'd spent years fixing other people's mistakes, patching up disasters caused by greed or ambition. But this wasn't someone else's mistake. It was his. And yet, he couldn't regret it. Not when he remembered Auri's face the first time she saw the stars. Not when he heard her laughter filling rooms that once held only silence. But the consequences were coming. He could feel them pressing in, like a storm gathering on the edge of the horizon. The first sign arrived the next day. 4 figures moved through the docking bay, their steps precise, their presence magnetic. Clad in dark armor that shimmered with shifting patterns, they carried themselves with the ease of predators, elite soldiers. They did not announce themselves. They did not need to. Their insignias spoke louder than words, the mark of a unit whispered about in fear across a dozen systems. They answered to no one but the high command. They had come for something, or someone. And as Elias stood in his workshop, unaware of their exact arrival but haunted by the sudden hush in the station's usual chaos, he knew in his bones they had come for him, and for the girl who now saw too much. That evening, Auri sat beside him, visor glowing faintly. She traced the air with her fingers, smiling softly. "They're closer now," she murmured. Elias froze. "Who's closer?" Her small hand hovered in the air, weaving invisible threads. "The shadows with heavy steps. They're looking for you." His blood ran cold. She had seen them before he even knew they were here. The visor had opened her eyes, but perhaps it had opened something else too. The station air felt heavier, not physically, not in the way of gravity or pressure, but in the way silence thickens before a storm. Conversations hushed, steps quickened, eyes darted toward shadows, then away again, as though looking too long, might draw danger closer. Elias knew something had shifted. When he entered the workshop that morning, his tools were exactly where he left them. The circuits glowed with the same faint hum. And yet, the air smelled of metal and ozone the way it did near armed patrols. Someone was close, watching, and they were patient. That night, Cale burst into the room, his voice a whisper sharp with panic. "They're here." Elias looked up from the bench where Auri sat, visor humming softly as she traced invisible patterns in the air. "Who?" Elias asked, though he already knew. Kyle's throat bobbed. "The 4, elite soldiers. They've been seen in the upper levels. They're asking questions. About you. About her." Auri turned her head, her visor's glow reflecting in Elias's tired eyes. "The heavy steps," she murmured. "I told you. They're close." Elias's heart sank. He had hoped it was only fear playing tricks on him. But Auri, she saw things no one else could. Threads, shadows, intentions woven into the air. If she said they were close, then they were close. He wanted to run. Every instinct screamed it. Pack up, leave the station, vanish into the labyrinth of trade routes and forgotten colonies. He'd done it before, years ago, when debts chased him across systems. He knew how to disappear, but Auri couldn't. She wasn't just a child anymore. She was a child who carried something precious, something the galaxy would fear, covet, maybe even worship, and Kale. Kale would never abandon her. Elias clenched his fists. Running wasn't an option, not this time. The knock came at midnight, not a frantic pounding, not the uncertain shuffle of a neighbor. It was deliberate, 3 slow strikes that echoed like hammers on a coffin. Kyle went pale. Auri's visor pulsed. Once, a faint ripple of light. "They're here," she whispered. Elias rose, every muscle tight, and opened the door. 4 figures stood in the corridor. They wore armor that shifted like liquid metal, colors blending into the shadows, yet edged, with faint luminescence. Each bore a different insignia on the chest plate marking their specialization. Their helmets were sleek, reflective, hiding their eyes, making them look more like living weapons than beings. The one in front stepped forward. His voice was calm, almost soft, but carried the weight of authority. Elias Marin. "Human engineer, you will come with us." Elias swallowed hard. "Why?" The soldier tilted his head. "You know why?" Auri shifted behind him, clutching Kale's arm. The visor glowed brighter, as though responding to their presence. She whispered, "Their threads are sharp. They don't bend. They cut." The words chilled Elias. He forced himself to meet the soldier's faceless gaze. "I've broken no laws." Another soldier spoke, her voice sharper, layered with static. "You created an unauthorized bioneural device. You altered the natural state of a child of this station. That alone is violation enough." Kyle growled, stepping forward. "You call giving her sight a violation? She was blind. He helped her." The Pabio soldier's helmet tilted toward him. "He changed what was decreed." Decreed. Elias hated the word. It stank of bureaucracy wrapped in superstition, of power justified by fear. He drew in a breath. "I won't go anywhere without her." The lead soldier was silent for a long moment. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. "Very well. All of you will come." They moved through the station in silence, escorted like prisoners, though no restraints bound them. The crowd parted at the sight of the 4, whispers hissing through the air like sparks. Some looked at Elias with pity, others with fear. Auri held his hand tightly, visor glowing brighter than usual. She glanced left and right, her small voice carrying up to him. "They shine too bright. Their threads hurt my eyes." Elias squeezed her hand. "Stay close." The soldiers led them to a chamber high in the station's command spire. The doors hissed shut behind them, sealing with a sound that felt final. The room was circular, dimly lit, walls lined with panels displaying shifting data. At the center stood a long table of black glass. The soldiers spread around it, forming a perimeter. The leader removed his helmet. His face was pale, sharp, his eyes glowing faintly from augmentations. He studied Elias with a gaze that felt surgical. "You built something that should not exist," he said simply. Elias set his jaw. "I built a visor, nothing more." The soldier's eyes flicked toward Auri. "Then why does she see what others cannot?" Elias's stomach knotted. "What do you mean?" Another soldier stepped forward, her helmet still on. "She sees threads, currents of energy. She sees truth." Elias's chest tightened. They knew. Somehow they knew. Auri clutched Kale's arm, whispering, "They don't ask because they're curious. They ask because they're afraid." The leader's gaze sharpened. "The device you built does not merely restore vision. It awakens perception beyond biology." Do you understand what that means, human? Elias didn't answer. His silence was enough. It means, the soldier continued, you have tampered not only with flesh, but with the very weave of existence, and that cannot be allowed to spread. The word struck like a blade. Elias glanced at Ori. She stood trembling, visor glowing brighter, her lips parted as though she wanted to speak but couldn't. He stepped in front of her, anger igniting. You call it tampering, I call it saving. She was blind. Now she can live. The soldier's expression did not change. And because of you, she can see what she was never meant to see. Do you think the galaxy will allow that? Do you think those in power will let such a truth exist? Elias's voice broke. Then let them try to take it. She's not a weapon. She's a child. Silence fell. The soldiers exchanged glances, subtle but unmistakable. Then the leader leaned forward, his voice dropping. That is precisely why they will come for her, and why we were sent, to decide if you and she can be allowed to remain, the Dao. Words crushed the air from Elias's chest. This was no warning. This was judgment. He looked at Ori, small, trembling, visor glowing with impossible light. He looked at Kyle, eyes burning with fear and fury. Then back at the four, who stood like statues carved of steel and inevitability. He knew then that there was no reasoning, no bargaining. This was the beginning of a storm, and he had to choose. Surrender to it, or fight against it. But before he could speak, Auri's voice broke the silence. Her visor flared, brighter than ever, casting ripples of light across the black glass table. Her small hands shook, but her voice carried with startling clarity. You're wrong. The soldiers turned as one. Ori stepped forward, her voice trembling but unyielding. I wasn't meant to be blind. I wasn't meant to see only shadows. I was meant to see the threads, to see what you hide. Her words rang in the chamber like a bell. Elias's heart thundered. The soldier stood motionless, unreadable, and in that moment, Elias realized something terrifying. The visor had not just changed her life, it had changed her destiny. The chamber was silent. The kind of silence that crackles with tension, that hums louder than any noise. Ori's visor glowed like a second sun, casting threads of shifting light that only she could truly see. You hide the threads, she repeated, her voice shaking but steady. You pretend they don't exist. But I see them, and they see me. The four soldiers stood motionless, but Elias could feel their composure falter. The faintest ripple in their stances, the slightest pause in their breaths. They hadn't expected her to speak. They hadn't expected her to challenge them. The leader's voice was calm, but his eyes sharpened. Child, you see only because of what was given to you. A gift that must be contained. Ori shook her head, small fists clenched. It's not just a gift. It's the truth. And truth isn't meant to be hidden. Kyle stepped closer, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. If you touch her, you'll go through me first. Elias's heart thundered. He felt the words clawing at his throat, but all he could do was watch as the impossible unfolded. His invention had done this. His hands had built the visor. His stubbornness had given her sight. But what she had become, that was hers alone. The soldier to the right shifted, her armor whispering, Commander, permission to end this. Elias tensed. End this. He knew exactly what she meant, but the commander raised a hand. No, not yet. He turned his piercing gaze back to Elias. You did this. Tell me, why? Why risk your life, your freedom for her? Elias swallowed hard. His voice cracked but held. Because she deserves more than darkness. Because every child does. And if you call that a crime, then maybe your laws are the real blindness. The words hung heavy in the air. Ori's visor pulsed, as though feeding on his defiance. She looked up at him, her small voice breaking. "Elias, the threads want me to choose." The room seemed to grow colder. "Choose what?" he asked. Her lips trembled. "Whether to show them or to hide forever." The commander's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" Ori turned her gaze toward him. And for the first time, Elias saw fear flicker in the soldier's face. "I can open the threads," she whispered. "I can show you what you don't want to see." Cale's breath caught. Elias's pulse hammered. This was no longer about sight, no longer about a visor. This was about something far deeper, something that lived beneath the fabric of reality itself. The commander's jaw tightened. He spoke softly, almost pleading. "Child, you don't understand what you're saying. To open the threads is to unravel what holds us together. It is not meant for you. It is not meant for anyone." But Ori shook her head. Tears pooled beneath the visor's glow. "Then why can I see them? Why can I touch them? Why did Elias help me, if not for this?" Her words sliced through Elias. He hadn't known. He hadn't meant to. But maybe, just maybe, the visor had. Unlocked what she was always meant to become. And now she was standing at the edge of something vast, terrifying, and unstoppable. Cale gripped Elias's arm, whispering fiercely, "We can't let her. We don't know what it will do." But Elias's eyes stayed on Ori. He saw her trembling, torn between fear and courage, between silence and revelation. This wasn't his choice anymore. It was hers. The soldiers shifted again, restless now. Weapons gleamed faintly at their sides, though none were drawn yet. They were waiting for her, for the decision of a blind child who now saw too much. Elias knelt in front of her, his voice soft, breaking. "Ori, listen to me. You don't have to prove anything. Not to them. Not to me. What you see, it's already yours. It doesn't matter if they believe." Her small hand shook as it reached for his. "But what if the threads want me to show them? What if hiding is wrong?" Elias's throat burned. "Then show them. But only if it's what you want. Not because they demand it. Not because I gave you the visor. Because it's your choice." Her visor pulsed brighter, as though alive. And then she chose. The light erupted, not blinding, not searing, but endless. An ocean of threads spilling into the chamber, weaving across the walls, curling through the air like rivers of living color. Elias gasped. Cale staggered. Even the soldiers froze as their armor flickered under the flood of impossible light. Ori stood at the center of it all, visor blazing, arms outstretched. "Do you see?" she whispered. And they did. The soldiers' helmets cracked with static as the threads wrapped around them, glowing with truths too deep to name. Their weapons hummed uselessly. Their armor groaned as if weighed down by something greater than gravity. Cale's eyes were wide, shimmering with reflected light. Stars above. Elias felt tears burning. The beauty was unbearable. Threads of every color, every memory, every possibility. He saw himself holding her hand the night she first saw the stars. He saw Cale's loyalty etched in strands of gold. He saw the soldier's fear tangled with duty, unraveling in front of him. And for a moment, just a moment, he felt the universe breathe. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the light dimmed. The threads curled back into the air, fading until only shadows remained. Ori collapsed, visor flickering. Elias caught her, heart pounding. "Ori, stay with me!" Her eyes fluttered beneath the visor. "I'm here." The chamber was silent, again. But nothing was the same. The four soldiers stood motionless. Their commander's face was pale, his augmentations flickering faintly. He looked at Ori, then at Elias, and for the first time his voice held something human. You've changed her. But more than that, she's changed us." The others said nothing. Finally, the commander replaced his helmet, his voice steady but softer. "We came to judge, but there is no judgment we can make. Not anymore." He turned to leave, the others following. At the door, he paused, looking back one last time. "Guard her well, human, for what she carries will either break us or save us." Then they were gone. Elias sat on the floor, cradling Auri, Kale kneeling beside them. The weight of what had happened pressed heavy, but beneath it was something else. Hope. Auri stirred, whispering faintly. "Did they see?" Elias kissed her forehead, voice breaking. "Yes, they saw." Her lips curved into a fragile smile. "Then it was worth it." And in that moment, Elias knew the truth. The visor had given her sight, but it was her courage that had given them vision, not of light, not of color, but of what it truly meant to see.